ثانية على حب الحسن والحسين، ثالثة على حب سيدة نساء العالمين بأعلى أصواتكم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. صلى الله عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله. Salutations upon you, my master, O messenger of Allah. صلى الله عليك وعلى آل بيتك المعصومين المظلومين. Salutations upon you and upon your oppressed immaculate progeny. صلى الله عليك يا سيدي يا أبا عبد الله. Salutations upon you, my master, O Aba Abdullah al-Hussein. Ya Gharib, Ya Madloom, Karbala. O he who was estranged and oppressed on the land of Karbala. Ya laytana kunna ma'akum sayyidi. We wish we were with you, O our master. فنفوز والله فوزا عظيما. For that would be the greatest of victories. Assalamu ala al-Husayn. All together. Assalamu ala al-Husayn wa ala Ali ibn al-Husayn wa ala awlad al-Husayn wa ala ashab al-Husayn wa ala alladhina badhalu muhajahum dun al-Husayn ورحمة الله وبركاته. صلوات. قال الله تعالى: صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل لئن اجتمعت الإنس والجن على أن يأتوا بمثل هذا القرآن لا يأتون بمثله ولو كان بعضهم لبعض ظهيرا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in this blessed verse, He says, look, if the jinn, meaning say to them, قل, so Allah is instructing the Holy Prophet to say to people, that if the jinn and men were to come together and they would work hard to come up with a Quran like this and support each other, right? That surely they wouldn't be able to come up with a Quran such as this one, even if they were to support one another. Sadaqallahu al-Aliyyul Azim. Amanna billah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In the last few nights, we have been really covering the topic of Tawheed, if you recall. And what we did was we were able to prove not only the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the simple proof of organization, where we looked at simple examples around us in the world, right? And we said that these are examples of organization. So we looked at an orange, we cut it in half. We looked at an onion, we cut it in half. We looked at the sunrise and the sunset, right? We looked at the solar system. We said all of these things are things that are organized. We even looked at onion cells under a microscope, and we said that they're stacked right next to the other, just like bricks on a wall, each one having a cell nucleus, a cell wall, and cell fluid. And we said that surely that looks organized, and we all agreed that that is organized. Agreed? If you agree, say I agree. We then said the second part of that proof was that we look at organized systems and we ask ourselves, who organized these things, right? We said, who organizes your room? Who organizes a doctor's office? Who organizes a school? Who organizes your home? We determined that for each one, the answer was someone organizes that space. Agreed? If you agree, say I agree. And then we said, okay, so that means that everything organized really has an organizer, a creator of its organization. Makes sense? If it makes sense, say it makes sense. Good. So then we said, okay, so let's review. Since the world is organized based on the examples that we looked at, and then we said, then since everything organized has a creator of its organization, then that clearly means that the world has a creator of its organization. Makes sense? If it makes sense, say it makes sense. If I'm right, say you're right. After that, we said, okay, this creator, what characteristics does he have, right? Is there more than one creator? Or, and what does this mean to me? I mean, how relevant is this to my life today, living in 2024, right? So we said, okay, let's ask ourselves, who created the world? We know there's a creator, but who created it? Was it me? We said, well, we're too weak, we're in need, it can't be me or any other human being, right? We came to this world and it was already there. So how could we have created it? That doesn't make any sense. In philosophy, they call that a circular argument, right? And it couldn't be that, we say a human was the one that created it, because if you say, oh, well, if I created it and it wasn't me, then who was it? Was it my parents? If it wasn't them, then who was it? Was it their grandparents? My grandparents? If it wasn't, who was it? The great-grandparents, the great-grandparents, we go ad infinitum, meaning until no limit. That's called an infinite regression argument, and that is considered to be false in philosophy. Okay? So now I'm adding some terms for you, to add to your vocab here. Okay? But it's not important for you to know these terms in order for this proof to be easy and relevant, by the way. Okay, just so that you know. It's just common sense. One, the circular argument just means what? That listen, if I'm created and I come to this world, how could I have created it? Right? There had to be something that created me. That doesn't make any sense to say, oh, I created this world and I didn't even exist. Right? That's one. Two, the infinite regression is very, very basic. All it means is, listen, something can't go ad infinitum. It's got to stop somewhere. That's all that means. Okay? And that's why it's false to say that, oh, yes, things will go up ad infinitum, right? Oh, let's go back in creation until forever. No, that doesn't work. It has to stop somewhere. Makes sense? If it makes sense, it makes sense. It's exactly like, if you will, let's say, for example, you have a bunch of marbles, okay? And one marble hits the other. Right? Now, can that go ad infinitum? If we go back to what was the original mover, the original marble, what was it? Was it still, or did it need someone or something to move it? It needed someone or something to flick it, right? And move it. Right? So that's why we're saying it's got to be false. You can't go back until until infinitum. You've got to stop somewhere. There has to be an original mover. And that was actually the proof Aristotle used, by the way. Right? Everybody's heard of Aristotle? Yeah? Aristotle, the great philosopher, right? Some of these names, by the way, just to mention, this is something we mention as an intro to logic when we're teaching it, is there are these philosophers such as Socrates who coined the term philosophy, by the way. Right? Did you know that Socrates came in the time of sophists, and they believed in wisdom, and they believed they were the wise ones. But Socrates came along and he said, no, we're not the sophists. We are philosophists, meaning philo means lover of, sophist means wisdom. It says we love the wisdom of God. And he actually proved that there is only one God. He was a deist, and he was actually incarcerated and assassinated by the government, by the Greek government, because of that belief. Did you know this? We even actually have a narration. Now, how correct it is or not is besides the point, but we even have a creation that actually says that Socrates was a prophet to his people. Isn't that interesting? Right? Yeah. And not only that, if you move forward, whether it's Plato, his student, or Aristotle, we have a story about Al-Aous. He traveled to Egypt, specifically to the area called Alexandria. He was returning, and the prophet was known to come out and receive those who are returning from travel. So he's there, he's receiving them, and he sees Al-Aous, and he asks him, what did you see? He said, well, in Alexandria, I saw people sitting in circles, and they were Aristotelizing, meaning that they were discussing the opinions of Aristotle. Okay? So he said, Al-Aous said, La'anahumullah, may Allah damn them. The Prophet responds, he says, says, silence, don't say such a thing. إِنَّهُ كَانَ نَبِيًّا لِقَوْمِهِ. He was a prophet to his people. So remember, there are 124,000 prophets. We don't know all of them, right? Okay? But isn't that an interesting piece of information for you? Yeah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Okay, so back to where we were. So then we said, okay, so who created this world? We said, well, let's look at creators, because we know it can't be a human being, can't be land mass, it's limited by bodies of water, it can't be the earth because it's limited by its atmosphere, it can't be other planets, they're all limited by their orbit around the solar system, it can't be the solar system, it's limited by its universe itself, because Einstein proved that the universe expands and contracts. He says it's in a constant state of expansion. Though it does contract, it continues to expand. For something to expand and contract, it needs limits. Do you agree with that? From which to expand and contract from. Does that make sense? If it makes sense, say it makes sense. Right, Mustafa? Yeah? Good. I got a thumbs up from Mustafa. Alhamdulillah. Good. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So then we say, okay, well, let's look at creators, right? That's what we said. We said, let's look at creators. What do they have in common? We said, well, a creator we know is greater than what they create, right? Makes sense? If it makes sense, say it makes sense. Right. By the way, what I'm doing here is what we do in Hausa. All right, before we start a class, we get into a new topic, we review the last class. So I'm bringing Hausa to you. What I'm doing right now with you, getting your agreement, getting you to answer, this is called mubahatha. This is what we do in the Hausa, right? We discuss it, we review the past class, then we go into the new information. Does that sound good to everyone? Right? Okay, good. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Plus, the benefit is, mashallah, for those who didn't write notes yesterday or the day before, they can, re-up their notes. For those who newly came and didn't attend before, now you're up to date. Makes sense, right? Yes? Good. So we said then the creator of something is greater than what they create. So based on that, then, if we apply that to, everything limited, right? We said everything limited. What about the creator of everything limited? Its creator also isn't limited by what he creates. And if what he created is everything limited, then he must be what? Limited or unlimited? Unlimited. It's that simple. Right? We said since he's unlimited, he doesn't have a beginning. I want Ali fill in blanks. He doesn't have a Hassan. He doesn't have a beginning, nor does he have an end. And that means he always existed and he always will exist. Hassan Ali, good job. Good job filling in the blanks. Well done. Okay, so that also means then that he's everywhere. Agreed? If you agree, say I agree. Exactly. He's everywhere. He sees all things. He doesn't need, say it with me, doesn't need eyes. He hears all things. He doesn't need ears and apparatus. Exactly what I said before. An apparatus with which to hear. Exactly. Also, since he's unlimited and flaws are limits, that means he has no flaws. Ahsantum. Which means he is flawless. Another word for flawless is perfect. Good job. Ahsantum. Good job. شوفوا جاي يسمعون ويستوعبون ما شاء الله. Very good. Okay. So that means then that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, since he's all perfect, he doesn't make any mistakes, right? Everything he does with a purpose and for a purpose. Make sense? So each and every single one of us was created with a purpose and for a purpose. Agree? If you agree, say I agree. And not just that, since the all perfect created each and every single one of us, then how valuable are we? More than a lot. That would be pretty accurate. Yeah. Okay. So should I be looking at, the cool kids in school to, for my self-worth? Or should I just know that I have great self-worth because of that proof? That means that my self-worth comes from whom? From society or from my creator? Who does it come from? Allah, the creator. Exactly. Also, comfort. I get comfort from this proof, from this tawheed. Why? Because I know that no matter what happens, right? Am I ever alone? I'm never alone. So my self-esteem should not hang on others' opinions, number one, right? My self-esteem comes from Allah. He determined me worthy of existing, and therefore I am extremely valuable. I have great worth. Right? That's number one. And number two, I need not look for others, opinions of me to get fulfillment. I should receive that fulfillment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when I feel lonely and down, I should always remember I am not alone. I'm in the presence of Allah. See? Now let me ask you this. Let's take it one step further. Okay? If I ask someone who is limited for something, will they give me limited results? Or unlimited results? If I ask from someone who is limited. Limited results, exactly. Could it be that even if I fulfill what I ask them, because by time or space or someone or something? Yes. But if I ask from the unlimited, what will my results be? Limited or unlimited? Unlimited. See? Let that sit and simmer in your minds and in your hearts. So often we depend on others, but in reality, I need to depend on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is true tawakkul. And not just that, if Allah tells me you need to depend on my representatives, right, which is embodied by when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders the angels to bow down to Adam, right, and they all bow down to Adam, right, except for whom? Shaitan. Iblis, Hasan, right? And Allah, what does he do to Iblis? He labels him as a kafir, that he is a disbeliever in Allah, right? And he receives eternal damnation. That is his punishment, right? So when Allah tells you, come to me through those who I place as representatives, and that is what the bowing down to Adam represents, right? It represents what? Praying to and worshiping Adam or worshiping Allah? Worshiping Allah. Therefore, following what Adam, the Prophet of Allah, would give them becomes what? A way to whom? To Allah. This is intercession. Allah says from the beginning of creation. So those who come to you and say to you, why do you go and visit the Prophet of Allah? He is dead. He can do nothing for you. Say, who says? First of all, the Prophet was martyred. And Allah says in the Holy Quran, and do not say about those who are martyred that they are dead, but rather they are living and sustained by their Lord. Right? That's number one. Number two, right? This individual is a representative of Allah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent him as a mercy to the worlds. Right? وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. Surely we sent you for no other reason other than for you to be a mercy to people, to all of the worlds. Therefore, if I come near to the mercy of Allah, then what will I receive? The mercy of Allah, right? If I obey the messenger of Allah, then that is equal to obedience to who? To Allah. And therefore, will I receive Allah's mercy? Yes, I will. It's logical. Makes sense? If it makes sense, it makes sense. Okay. So then after that, of course, I give you some extra stuff here, right? That's going to help you answer some very critical questions. Because if someone tells you, well, why do you bow down to Imam Ali when you go there? We say, first of all, when we bow down in the shrines, we bow down khuya, for one reason. Thanks and gratitude to Allah that we got there. That's number one, okay? That's the main reason. It's sajda to shukr. Everybody has it, okay? Why do we go visit these graves, right? We go visit these graves because what do we find? We find that Imam Hussein salamullahi alayhi visited the grave of his father. He visited the grave of his mother. He visited the grave of the Holy Prophet before he left to go to Mecca, right? And so if these representatives of Allah do something, then that means that is something we must do, right? Makes sense? If it makes sense, say it makes sense. When our grandparents, Allah yatawwal ba'amar aba'akum wa ajdadkum, may Allah prolong the lives of your parents and grandparents, right? We see them when they go and visit the graves of their parents and their grandparents, right? This is in every culture. Do they go and worship them when they go and visit them? Huh? When they cry for them in sorrow because they miss them, are they doing shirk with Allah? No. It's common sense, right? It's human emotion. right? It's connecting to those who you love. So if we were to visit the grave of the Prophet or Ahl al-Bayt, is that shirk and worship of anyone other than Allah? Or is that paying respects to those whom Allah placed on this earth as representatives? Did you know that the Holy Prophet is narrated to have said, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad? Ana wa anta ya Ali abawa hadhihi al-ummah. You and I, O Ali, are the fathers of this nation. So if my father was to pass away, my father passed away 2 years ago during the Corona period, right? And I go and visit his grave, right? Does that mean that that I'm worshiping him, or that I'm ascribing a partner to Allah? Or I'm respecting someone that Allah placed on my life and guided me and made me the person who I am today, right? So why is it okay for my dad and my mom, but not okay for the Holy Prophet? Doesn't Allah say in the Holy Quran, قُلْ لَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ أَجْرًا إِلَّا الْمَوَدَّةَ فِي الْقُرْبَى? Right? Does not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell the Holy Prophet to say to us, okay, say to them this, he says, I don't ask you for any rewards except for showing kindness and care and love and allegiance to whom? To my near of kin, to my family. Right? So that means, what would I do? If the Prophet cries for Hussein, salamullahi alayhi, then I must cry. And the books of history and the narrations show that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam cried for Imam Hussein when he passed by Karbala. Imam Ali salamullah alayhi cried for Imam Hussein when he passed by Karbala after specific battles, right? Before Imam Hussein was born. That Imam Hussein, when he was born, the Holy Prophet went to the house of Al-Zahra, right? He held the baby. He started crying. She said to him, "O Messenger of Allah, why do you cry? وَهُوَ ابْنُ السَّاعَةِ?" And he just was born within this hour. He says to her, "This son of mine, تَقْتُلْهُ الْفِئَةُ الْبَاغِيَةُ مِنْ أُمَّتِي," that the transgressors from my ummah, from my very nation, will kill him. So he starts to cry. So what is the sunnah of the Prophet? Can anybody tell me what is the definition of the word sunnah? Alaykum salam. Does anybody know? Yes, brother, what's your name? Adam. What's the definition of sunnah? No. Sunnah is what the Prophet says, what he does, and what he agrees to. Got it, Adam? So you follow in the footsteps of the Prophet. Ahsant, exactly. Okay? All right? Okay, so that is the sunnah of the Prophet. So if that's the sunnah of the Prophet, I see what he does. He cries, it becomes sunnah. And so I cry. Makes sense? If it makes sense, say it makes sense. Okay? Yes, sister, go ahead. Oh, that's very nice of you. Inshallah, you'll be better than me. Inshallah. Inshallah, you will be one day تصيرين عالم inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. May Allah bless you. Okay. All right, so let's get back to what we were saying. So we dealt with some issues that I thought would be important, especially during these days. You might have friends from the other school of thought, right? So it's important to be able to answer these questions for them, because they might not have thought about these issues, because they might have been taught certain things that maybe, need clarification, right? Might not be necessarily right. Sometimes it's just something obvious right in front of you, and you really just need to point it out to someone, right? Does that make sense? If it makes sense, say it makes sense. I remember, one of my friends from the other school of thought, he said to me, you guys bow down to the Prophet and to the Imams, how can you do that? That's shirk. I said, what if I prove to you in the Holy Quran that Allah commanded the angels to bow down to his representative on this earth? Is the Prophet a representative? He said, yes. Is the Prophet better than Prophet Adam? He said, yes. He's the seal of the prophets, of course. Like, why are you asking me that? Of course, that's clear. I said, well, if Allah commands the angels to bow down to Adam, right? You accept that? He said, yes. I said, if the Prophet is better than Adam, then will the angels bow down to Prophet Muhammad as well, or no? Of course. It's logical. Makes sense? If it makes sense, say it makes sense. Right? Khatam al-Anbiya, the seal of prophets, the best of Anbiya, right? Of course. And that prostration doesn't mean ubudiyya, you're not worshiping him. No, you're affirming that I follow and obey the representative of Allah based on what? Based on what Allah placed him on this earth to do. That's all that represents. It's not worshiping him. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala. Okay. All right, we went through the issue of chaos theory, right? And trials and tribulations. We said when it comes to trials and tribulations in this life, you know, when somebody tells you, well, what about earthquakes? You say the world is organized. What about earthquakes? What about natural disasters? What about disease? What about cancer? What about all this stuff? We said, listen, this world by nature, right, in itself is a moving system, right? So when you have earthquakes or natural disasters, then what's going to happen? You're going to have earthquakes at the fault lines. If I didn't have fault lines, this world would be like a pressure cooker when you don't remove the cap so that the whistle goes and pressure is relieved. If I don't do that, what happens to that pressure cooker? Becomes an explosive device. It blows up. And if the world didn't have fault lines, then what would happen to the entire earth? It would be obliterated. Agreed? That's the best word I can think of for it, right? So when Allah puts fault lines and certain people end up dying or becoming or getting injured in those areas, you know, we look at who died, we don't look at who survived, right? There's so many, the entire world survived because of these fault lines, number one. Number two, those who did die, right? It's Allah who created them and decided when they would be alive in this world. And it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who is the only one that decides when He removes them from this world. Make sense? That makes sense? Say it makes sense. And if they are injured, then that is their trial and tribulation. Allah made it that way, right? To give them an opportunity, right? To see, will they still, you know, remember Allah or will they not? Or if they were in a state of disbelief and they didn't think of Allah, then this calamity and this disaster is going to shake them up enough to do what? To say, oh, Allah, help me, right? When they're in such a situation. Make sense? That makes sense? Say it makes sense. So it's going to bring them closer to Allah. Santum. We said there are trials and tribulations that I go through that are from Allah. And then there are such as the earthquakes, right? Or congenital disorders, right? But then there are those trials and tribulations that come from my own choices. Agreed? If you agree, say I agree, right? Those trials and tribulations that come from my own choices. Now, are they Allah's fault or my fault if the consequences are bad, if I make the bad choice? Like if I decide to smoke, say no to smoking, right? If I decide to smoke and I get lung cancer, whose fault is that? We said, my fault or Allah's fault? My fault, exactly. Now, yes, some will say, but it's unfair, Sheikhna, that some people make decisions that hurt others. As we said, we see how Netanyahu is hurting the Palestinians. We see how, you know, Muawiyah and Yazid hurt the Muslims, the Shia, the followers of Ahlul Bayt. How Saddam, we said, hurt the Shia of Ahlul Bayt as well, right? And that's why, you know, our parents are here and how we ended up here. So we said, does that mean that Allah is unfair? Here we looked at choice. We said, is choice good or bad? It's good, right? Allah only does what is good, agreed? So Allah must give us choice. Why? Because to be forced to do something is bad or good? Bad. Is it oppressive, would you say, or no? It's oppressive. Does Allah oppress? We said He's all perfect, which means He's all just. He doesn't oppress. So that means what? That means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He placed me in this system, He allowed for choice. Choice is a necessity. Makes sense? If it makes sense, it makes sense. Because it is good, and Allah only does what is good. But when somebody makes a bad choice, right? Is that Allah's fault, or is that that individual's choice for making that wrong decision? Huh? Which one? Altogether, which one? Allah or the person? The person. Ahsantum. But why does Allah allow for it to happen? Because that's the very nature of the system. Choice dictates that that's going to happen. Free will dictates that we're going to make a good choice or a bad choice. But Sheikhna, I can't handle, you know, these poor kids. How can they handle it? We say, hang on. Allah, we said, is all fair and all just. Agreed? If you agree, say I agree. If He burdens us with more than we can handle, is that cruel and oppressive or no? Yes. So then would Allah do that if He's perfect and all just? No. Altogether. Would He do it? No. Altogether. Would He be oppressive? No. He would not be oppressive. Why? Because He is all perfect. Therefore He is all just. Got it? So that means then, even though I may perceive that this challenge is tough, in reality, Allah would not burden me with more than I can handle, as tough as it may seem, right? And it becomes something that I can handle. And that's how I need to look at these trials and tribulations and challenges in my life. Make sense? If it makes sense, say it makes sense. So what does this trial and tribulation then become? What does it become? It becomes what? An opportunity. Becomes a chance, as Ali said to us the last few nights, right? An opportunity to do what, Sajjad? To prove myself to Allah, sent my purpose. It's an opportunity to exercise my purpose. And we said, what is my purpose? We said, Allah's all purposeful. We all have a purpose. We said, what is my purpose in life? Worshipping Allah, right? We said, what is worshipping Allah? We said, it's showing gratitude and thanks to Allah. Just as our parents brought us to this world, we said we have to thank them and please them. We feel that right that they have upon us. Agreed? If you agree, say I agree. All right? So based on that then, does not Allah have the greatest right upon us? Since He gave us our parents and their parents and the very breath that I breathe. And we said, what does that breath represent? An opportunity. An opportunity to show Allah how grateful we are. Now imagine if we stay in this life and we don't have any trials and tribulations. How are we really going to prove to Allah, right, that we really appreciate Him? We won't have that opportunity, right? It has to be that He gives us a system in which He tests to see which of us really appreciates Allah most. So then He gives us trials based on the level that we're at. He's not going to give a 10-year-old the same trial that He would give an 80-year-old. Make sense? Now we say, but, what about that individual who was that child who was in the earthquake in Turkey, right? Why did Allah burden him with that? An adult could handle that, not a child. We said, no. We said, that child, you saw him on TV, say what? Say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. What did he do? He was saying his last testimony to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what did that do? That opened up everybody's eyes. Agreed? When people who are older see kids in Palestine suffering as they are, seeing their mothers and their fathers and their siblings and their uncles and their aunts die, right? Just like that. With a flash of a second, they lose all of their family, and you hear them say, Alhamdulillah, right? What did that do to the world? What did that do? It brought people to Islam. It made Muslims wake up, right? Am I right or am I wrong? If I'm right, tell me I'm right. If I'm right, tell me I'm right. Good. I love hearing that I'm right. Ahsantum. Especially when it's about the truth and Allah. So then now this trial becomes a test of my love and allegiance to Allah. To be able to exercise my purpose, to show Allah how grateful I am that He brought me to this world, right? For surely I am undeserving, but if you, O Allah, chose for me and you determined that I'm deserving, then I'm going to prove to you and show to you that with every opportunity that you give me in trials and tribulations, I will know that I am not alone. I will know that you are with me. I will know that they are limited, right? Because that's the very nature of this world. And so every trial and tribulation has a beginning and an end, right? So I must be patient through any trial and tribulation that I go to by logical necessity, because I will make it through and I will become stronger after it. Make sense? If it makes sense, it makes sense. And so now when I look at challenges in my life, how do I look at them? I look at them as what, Mustafa? Opportunities to come closer to Allah. Just like if I'm playing on my Xbox and my PlayStation, we said. Agreed? Right? I'm going to keep playing that level until I understand all the proper steps I need to take to be able to move on to level 2, right? And then at level 2, yes, I'm going to fall on my face a few times at that level, but until I gain the proper skills that I need to be able to master that level, right? Allah is going to keep giving me opportunity after opportunity until I become strong enough to handle level 3, and so on, and so on, and so on, right? And we said you can take a simple example of a baby when they first learn how to turn, and then they learn how to crawl, and then they get up and learn how to walk, and every time they fall on their face, they get right back up and they try again, right? They get hurt, you hear them whimpering a little, but then what do? They get back up and they keep walking. That's the very innate nature of progress and seeking perfection that is innate and inborn within each and every single one of us. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala. Good. We talked about chaos theory. We said that this is a theory that was created by Edward Lorenz, who studied atmospheric phenomena. He determined that atmospheric phenomenon can be determined by an algorithm, that it's not random. We said there's no such thing as randomness, right? This was clearly defined by his algorithm and his studies. He said, listen, anything you see that you don't understand, that seems random, really is a supreme form of order. The reason why we think it's random is because we don't have the tools to measure it, right? We can't determine why this happened because we don't have the technology. But once we have the technology, then we're able to uncover the reality behind it. Remember when people used to say that, darkness is just nothingness, right? And now they say darkness is dark matter. Then they said dark matter, which means it's something, right? And then they said, well, we don't know how dark matter comes along, right? They said, well, how does dark matter come along? They said, we know it's, but we don't know. They discovered quarks. Today, they don't know how quarks pop up. This is quantum physics, right? They don't know how quarks pop up, but one day they will know. They will discover it. Agreed? Remember how at one point people thought the earth was flat, right? And Galileo comes along and proves that the earth is spherical, right? Agreed? So there is no randomness. We talked about coincidence, right, as well. We said coincidence are just two incidents that occur deliberately, whether they're as a result of, the natural laws of physics, or whether they're a result of your own choices, right? But these are two incidents that occurred together, therefore coexisted, and therefore they are coincidents. There's no randomness in them. Agreed? If you agree, say I agree. So far, so good? Okay. Then we also talked about Benoit Mandelbrot. We said Benoit Mandelbrot is the father of fractal mathematics. He was trying to measure, we said, land masses, and he discovered the algorithm, right, for doing that. And he discovered that everything starts with a small fractal. And we said, if you look at your phones, right, the reason why they're so small today is because there's a fractal antenna, the smallest instance of an antenna that is needed in order for your phone to have reception. Okay? Right? And this was used to also say, okay, well, what about how do we measure forests? They said, oh, it's the same algorithm can be used to measure forests, right? The distance between trees, the distance between, the trunk and the branches, the distance between the branches and the leaves, right? These are all determined by that same algorithm. The same thing with corals and coral reefs, right? The same thing with the smoke as it occurs, right, from a fire. The same thing with H2O and water, as we see it here in the bottle, right? However million molecules are in here. Okay? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So then we said there's no randomness and coincidence, right? Now, all that we've been doing so far, we used our intellects to get to it, right? We reached a point where we said, okay, so our purpose in life then, we said, is to do what? Is to show gratitude to Allah. We said, how can we do it? We said one way, we said specifically two ways, but one way, the first way is to emulate, right? And we said to emulate Allah means to follow Him, see what He does. So He's kind to His creations, therefore I must be kind. He is tolerant of His creations, therefore I must be tolerant, right? Is that what we said? Okay. We said that He gives us opportunities, therefore we must give others opportunities, right? مو نقطع علاقتنا مع الآخرين just because والله غلط علينا مرة. No. 20 years I don't talk to someone والله because he offended my wife or he offended me or he said something about my kid. ايش دعوة يا معود؟ شو القصة؟ 20 سنة ما تحكي ويا أختك for that reason. This is not right. Okay? This is not right. Allah gives us opportunity after opportunity. And we see, right? What we find here then is that's the first way to attain our purpose, to emulate Allah. The second is to see what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends me as a message. And we looked at 5 criteria. We said, number 1, to determine that a message is from Allah, you have to, first of all, look at Allah's characteristics. Since He's unlimited, He's constant, He's unchanged, His message must be constant and unchanged. We applied this to the Torah, the Bible, and the Holy Quran. We said only the Quran matches, fulfills that criterion. But the Torah and the Bible don't, because they don't exist in their original form. Torah doesn't even exist. Today they use the Jewish Bible, which is the Pentateuch, which is the first 5 Gospels of the Old Testament, right? We said the second criterion is that it has to be perfect, has to have no contradictions in it. And we said Afwan, and the constancy also, the Holy Quran, of course, from before, from 1400 years ago to this very day, exists in the same language, unlike the current Bible that we have that was written 100 to 1,300 years after the death of Jesus. The original Bible was lost. It was in Aramaic. Okay, so inshallah, tomorrow we'll continue talking about this issue. Today is the night of Ali al-Akbar. So we go to Karbala. We go to the family of knowledge, those who are the representatives of Allah on this earth. And what do we see? We see, brothers and sisters, that after Imam Hussein, Salamullahi alayhi, lost all of his companions, martyred on the land of Karbala, the first person to go up to him and to ask him, "Oh, dear father, let me be the first to go out from the holy household to protect the household of the holy Prophet of Allah." And so what happens, brothers and sisters, is Imam Hussein, Salamullahi alayhi, would direct himself to the enemy camp. And what would he say? He says, "Allahumma shahad, oh Allah, bear witness that a young man will go out to them to fight who is the most in likeness and in logic to whom? To the Holy Messenger of Allah." And so Ali al-Akbar would go out into the battlefield and he would fight valiantly. He would get tired. He would come back to the camp and he would say to his father, "Al-Atash, Al-Atash, Al-Atash, do you have something to give me?" He gives him his ring and he says, "Suck on this, dear son, as you're fighting, as you go back into the battlefield, for surely soon you will drink a drink after which you will never feel thirsty again. For your grandfather, the Holy Prophet of Allah, will be there, and your grandfather, Amir al-Mu'mineen, will be there, and your grandmother will be there to give you a sip of water. Cold sip of water. Go out, dear son, into the battlefield." He would go out into the battlefield, brothers and sisters, and while he is there, they would notice that there would be one of the warriors of the enemy camp, and he was a very strong fighter. Imam Hussein, Salamullahi alayhi, would be looking out towards his son. His wife, the mother of Ali al-Akbar, Layla, would also be looking, and she would be worried. The Imam would say to her, "Go into your tent and make dua for your son, for surely the dua of a mother is answered if she makes it for her son." So she goes into the tent and she makes a dua. She says, "Oh Allah, oh He who returned Yusuf to his father Yaqub, please return my son to me safely." And sure enough, he would defeat that warrior and he would come back to the camp. After this point, he was so tired, he would complain to the Imam, Salamullah alayhi, the armor is so heavy, the sword is really heavy, I'm extremely tired and thirsty. He'd say to him, "Don't worry, dear son, soon you will drink a sip of water, after which you will never feel thirsty again." He sends him out into the battlefield, knowing full well he will not return. And when he goes out and he fights, what ends up happening? As he's fighting, he gets struck by a spear, he gets struck by an arrow, and he starts to bleed. He falls onto the mane of the horse, and as he falls onto the mane of the horse, instead of the horse going back into the camp of Ahlul Bayt, it ends up galloping into the enemy camp. And what ends up happening is they end up stabbing him. They surround him, they hit him with arrows, they stab him with their swords, they throw onto him, launching these spears, and he falls to the ground and he shouts out, "Abaya Hussein!" Imam Hussein, Salamullahi alayhi, gallops to his son. He removes all the men from around him. He holds his son and he sees him looking one moment at Imam al-Hussein and he cries. Another moment he looks away and he smiles. He says, "What are you doing, dear son?" He says, "When I look at you, I think of the fact that you will be alone, martyred by yourself on the land of Karbala. But when I look in the other direction, I see my grandfather, I see my mother, I see my great-grandfather, and they're all telling me, 'Come, come, dear son, Ali al-Akbar, for you we have a glass of water, after which you will no longer feel thirsty.'" And finally, brothers and sisters, after doing this back and forth, Ali al-Akbar would take his last breath. "Hal min munadi yunadi wa aliya wa madluma wa shahida." And Ali al-Akbar would be martyred on the land of Karbala. Let's give salams. Assalamu ala al-Hussein wa ala Ali ibn al-Hussein wa ala awlad al-Hussein wa ala ashab al-Hussein ورحمة الله وبركاته. Oh Allah, we ask you and beseech you that you accept what little we have done in these nights, the knowledge that we have gained. Oh Allah, increase our knowledge. Bring us nearer and nearer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and make us in the image of the companions of Ahlul Bayt. Oh Allah, on the day of judgment, let it be known that we commemorated, and that surely if we were given the opportunity, that we would be of the companions of Imam al-Hussein. Oh Allah, we ask you and beseech you that you support the center and all centers around the world who commemorate Imam al-Hussein and Ahlul Bayt. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على السيد المرسلين. ونسألكم, and we ask you that you don't forget our sick from your dua inshallah with the barakah of al-Fatiha مسبوقة بالصلاة على محمد وآل محمد.